right, thanks very much. I'm going to talk to you a bit today about installations. Bassam's touched on all the key points that you have to really be concerned with if you have a problem. But when you have a system, there are a lot of things that need to be done on an ongoing basis, not only in order to comply with code requirements, but to ensure the life expectancy that Ed was talking about earlier, because it applies to generators as well. So I'm going to go through some items here, and again, if you have any questions, we'll answer them at the end. The emergency generators are mandated by the building code according to the size and type of occupancy of the building, and the CSA standard that controls how the system is designed and installed is C282. The latest edition of which came out this April. It's 2015 edition. It's available for sale, and the engineers, of course, work with the latest code that's been adopted by the building code. So I believe we're on 09 right now with the current building code. Hopefully in the very near future, the 2015 edition will be adopted as well.
Still on 06 on the fuel code.
Yeah, you're still on 06 on the fuel side. One of the things we did, just to give you a little bit of history on that, as briefly as I can, CSA has a cycle for each of the standards that they produce, whether they're standards that have to be adopted or a code like the fuel installation code. And as of 2000, they changed the cycle for all of those documents to be 5 years. Well, that was fine, but they were still not synchronized. So every 5 years, something was done to issue a new document every year on that 5-year cycle. Starting in 2009, we started to recognize the fact that these standards need to be synchronized because they refer back and forth to each other. C282 refers to Z32 for healthcare facilities. It also refers to B139 for diesel sets and for B149 for gas and propane sets. So there was a need to synchronize these documents and harmonize them so that we weren't referring to stuff that was out of date in another publication. So as of 2015, the 4 documents that I've mentioned have all been harmonized. And for once and for all, hopefully, we can get away from the finger pointing, oh, well, that one says I do this and this one says I do that. And then the inspectors don't go crazy trying to figure out which one is more important. So going forward, I think you'll have a more standardized approach to how to regulate the systems that you have in place. 282 dictates requirements for the equipment, how it gets installed, and also how it gets maintained. Okay, maintaining it starts with the initial commissioning and goes on and on for the life of the unit. As far as diesels are concerned, the trend is to move away from diesels now because of the expense required in maintaining the fuel systems. But for many, many years, diesels were the only allowed system because you had to have fuel storage on site. Different parts of Canada react differently according to the geography of the area, like in BC, seismic zones, for example, and even in Ottawa, they're not too fussy about having natural gas emergency equipment. But in Toronto, it's pretty well accepted that you can go either way. But you have to have somehow a reliable fuel source, and if you're going with a liquid source like diesel, then it has to be a minimum of 2 hours supply, so that the purpose of the standard is to evacuate the building in case of an emergency. So you got 2 hours to get everybody out of the building, and that's what the generator is there for. As a result of that, the generator doesn't see many hours of use over the course of its life expectancy. I've seen generators that are 40 years old that only have less than 100 hours on them. Part of that is because they weren't maintained properly and tested regularly, but the other reason is the call for duty doesn't come very often, as you all know. Okay? So if you're having an on-site fuel supply, of course, then there's another standard that you must be in compliance with. But on a regular basis, there's a whole list of things that have to be done on a regular basis at different intervals over the course of the life of the unit to keep it working as reliably as possible. There's no point in having an emergency generator if you have an emergency and it doesn't work. Okay? That also affects your liability insurance with your insurance carriers. These days, risk is a huge topic with insurance companies, and if you don't have the records to substantiate that you've maintained the equipment properly, you risk paying higher premiums, especially if you have an event at the building and the fire department records it as an event that the generator didn't work. Okay, so it's a very important thing that the maintenance be done and it be recorded properly. This is a list of the stuff that has to be done on a weekly basis. These items are performed by the operators or maintenance personnel in the building. We train them how to do that when we have the commissioning services go to the site initially. And we also provide on an ongoing basis training seminars at free of charge for all of our customers, so they can send people to our office and just get refreshed on how to do this, or even learn if they've never seen one before. All right, but that's quite an extensive list just on a weekly basis. Then you have monthly inspections on things that don't require as much monitoring and testing. One of the important parts here is that on a monthly basis you operate the system under load for 60 minutes. Now, diesel engines are more susceptible to problems if you don't have 30% load. They start doing what's called wet stacking, and they make a mess all over the outside of the engine block. So the code requires that you have at least 30% load available, which in most cases, if the engineers have done their job properly in designing the system, you're going to have at least that minimum amount of load to test the system when the testing is done. Okay? But that 60 minutes exercises the engine. All right. It also gives you an opportunity to find out if there's anything wrong with the system, because you're heating up the engine. You're operating it not maybe at full temperature, but at a high enough temperature that you can see where problems are going to start to exist and do something about them before it becomes a real panic situation. Operating the system under load means that all the transfer switches have to operate. So you will have interruptions, tiny though they may be, in your power to your building loads, okay? And this is not the whole building, it's just the emergency loads, your elevators, the fire pump, which is sitting there stagnant anyway at the time, but all the emergency lighting will experience a flicker when the transfer switches operate, okay? That's normal. People complain about it, but really it's not even worth complaining about, because it only takes less than a second to occur in each case. But if you don't operate the transfer switches, you're not testing the whole system. Okay? And you can say, well, my emergency generator started, but we still didn't have power because the transfer switch didn't work. Well, that's great. So it's the point of the weakest link in the chain that you have to worry about. And if you don't test the whole system, you don't test all the links in the chain. Okay, we're getting... Okay, I'll go quicker through this. Semi-annual inspections have to be done. There's a bunch of things there. Then,
Maybe not. You have 5 minutes.
I know, but there are a lot of things. These are all listed in the C-282 document if you want to purchase it and have it on file. Annually, you have to do, among other things, a 2-hour load bank test, which is done at the full load rating of the system. Okay? That exercises the engine at its maximum temperatures that it's going to see, all right, and it gives our technicians a chance to monitor the whole system through that 2-hour test to see if anything's going wrong, okay? We do an infrared survey as well while the test is going on to see if there's any hot spots due to poor electrical connections, all right? And over time, things have a way of managing to work themselves loose sometimes because of heating and contracting as the cables heat up and cool off when loads come on and off over time. So, you know, it's very important that all the electrical connections be monitored. That's starting at the generator circuit breaker all the way to the transfer switches, okay? So that infrared survey is very important, but each one of these inspection periods includes all the stuff from the other periods, okay? So in other words, the monthly test includes all the weekly inspections because it's done on one of those weeks in the month. Same with the semi-annual and the annual. So the annual inspection takes quite a long time because you have to go through all the stuff that you would do every week, month, and 6-month period as well, okay? And then there's a list of it, all the stuff there. It's quite extensive. Again, these are what load banks look like. The top one there in the picture is a 1200 kilowatt load bank, so we use that on the larger sets, and on the smaller ones you see 3 of the 100 kilowatt. They're quite actually portable, so they can be taken up to the roof, which is where I think this picture was taken, on somebody's roof. But the cabling is quite a job sometimes, depending on where the generator is compared to where we can put these things outside. They generate a lot of heat. They're giant toasters, okay? So you can't have the heat going back into the building. The infrared survey, again, just to give you a pictorial idea, a handgun, thermal handgun is used to perform this. It's very quick. And we can go over a number of electrical connections in a short space of time. Fuel storage, okay. The fuel must pass an annual test. We extract a sample from the bottom of the tank, farthest away from the fill port if possible. So that's the worst possible sample we could get out of your tank. And we take a look at it. And if we can't see through it like this glass of water, you have a problem. Diesel fuel is susceptible to bacterial growth, and if there is water from condensation mixed in with the fuel, it supports the bacterial growth even more, okay, and promotes it. And you get, the one on the left there is probably the worst case example of what you might see coming out of the bottom of a fuel tank, okay? So that can cause problems all through your fuel system, besides the fact that it doesn't comply. So on an annual basis, we take a sample, and if you have dirty fuel, we will give you an estimate to clean the fuel by pumping it out and filtering it and putting it back in the tank over the course of maybe 2 or 3 or 4 hours, depending on how long it takes to do that much fuel. And as I was alluding to earlier, every 5 years we have to do another set of inspections, which is more invasive, if you like, into the system. Megger testing the generator windings, which means we have to disconnect them from anything else outside the generator machine and put a high voltage on them to see whether the insulation of the windings is breaking down. Replace thermostats, adjust valve clearances, and flush the cooling system. I'm just going to go to the next one. Now, as of the 2015 edition, we have to do infrared thermal imaging. So before we were coming with a heat gun and taking quick measurements to see if there was any alleged hot spots. Now we have to take a picture with a thermal imaging camera every 5 years, okay? So that's a more extensive and invasive approach, but it gives you a picture record of what was seen at the time of the inspection. And when the fire department comes in to check your records, you can show them all these pictures. They are to be stored with the rest of the reports. There's a lot of other stuff that has changed, may not directly affect maintenance in that sense, but how the system gets designed is definitely something that's going to be involved with the changes. And that's all I have at this time. I spend most of my time advising engineers on installation requirements for generators that we sell and educating them on, you know, how to design systems with generators properly. We've spent some time with these fine gentlemen here on many projects over the past 10 or 15 years. we're quite happy to work with them, and I appreciate them asking me to come today. Thank you very much.
Good luck.
The RHB Insider Network is an RHB Inc. production, publishers of RHB Magazine, and the producers of RHB Newsreel.